Kent, England. Spring 1815. Primrose Mills stood in the gardens of Thornfield Hall, her slender fingers clipping the lavender blooms with practiced precision. The early morning dew clung to the petals like tiny jewels, catching the light of the rising sun. She was quite certain that His Royal Highness, Prince Nicholas Whitmore, would scarcely notice her arrangements. Indeed, he had never noticed them in the 3 months she had been employed as an under-gardener, but she took pride in her work nonetheless. "Miss Mills, if you please," called Mr. Bartleby, the head gardener, his weathered face appearing from behind the rose trellis. "His Royal Highness has requested fresh flowers for the drawing-room. The Duke and Duchess of Harrington are to visit this afternoon." Primrose nodded, tucking a wayward strand of auburn hair beneath her cap. "Of course, Mr. Bartleby. I've just finished with the lavender. Perhaps I might add some of the early roses? They're quite lovely this morning." "Do as you will, girl," he replied with a dismissive wave. "Just ensure they're arranged and delivered within the hour." As Primrose gathered her blooms, selecting only the most perfect specimens, she allowed herself a small smile. Though she was but the daughter of a country vicar with no fortune to speak of, here in the garden she could create something of beauty that even royalty might appreciate. The east wing of Thornfield Hall loomed above her, its windows gleaming in the morning light. Prince Nicholas had taken residence at the estate for the spring season, escaping London after the celebrations marking Napoleon's defeat. It was rumoured he sought respite from the endless parade of eligible young ladies the Queen had been presenting to him, each more determined than the last to become the future Princess of Wales. Primrose carried her basket to the small workroom at the edge of the gardens, humming softly to herself as she arranged the flowers. Lavender for devotion, roses for love and beauty, a sprig of rosemary for remembrance, and delicate ferns to frame it all. Her mother had taught her the language of flowers before her passing, and though Primrose knew it was foolish fancy, she could not help but weave meaning into each arrangement. She had just finished her work when the door to the workroom opened, admitting a tall gentleman with broad shoulders and a stern countenance. Primrose gasped, immediately dropping into a curtsy so low she nearly upset her freshly arranged flowers. "Your Royal Highness," she murmured, eyes fixed firmly on the floor. "Rise, please," came a voice, rich and deep. "I was merely passing and caught sight of your work through the window." Primrose straightened but kept her gaze lowered as was proper. "I hope it meets with your approval, sir." Prince Nicholas stepped closer, examining the arrangement with a critical eye. "You've included lavender. Most unusual for a formal arrangement." It signifies devotion, Your Highness," Primrose ventured, then immediately bit her lip, cursing her forward tongue. A garden girl had no business explaining flower meanings to royalty. To her surprise, the prince smiled, a small, almost imperceptible lifting of one corner of his mouth. "And the rosemary?" "Remembrance, sir." He circled the table, studying her creation from all angles. "You speak the language of flowers, then?" "My mother taught me, Your Highness. Before she passed." Something flickered in his eyes, understanding, perhaps, or memory. "My mother was fond of such symbolism as well." He paused, then added, "You're new to Thornfield, are you not? I don't recall seeing you before this spring." "Yes, Your Highness. I arrived 3 months past, when my father took the living at Thornfield parish. Mr. Bartleby was kind enough to offer me position as under-gardener." "A vicar's daughter working as a gardener? Most unusual." Primrose felt heat rise to her cheeks. "My father's stipend is modest, sir, and I have always loved growing things. It seemed a natural choice." The prince considered this, his blue eyes, startlingly bright against his dark hair, studying her with interest. "What is your name?" "Primrose Mills, Your Highness." "Primrose," he repeated, as though testing the sound of it. "Like the flower. How appropriate." He gestured to the arrangement. "I shall have this placed in my private study, rather than the drawing-room. My guests today care little for such subtleties." Before Primrose could respond, he turned and departed, leaving her staring after him in bewilderment. That evening, as Primrose helped her father prepare for dinner in their small cottage at the edge of the Thornfield estate, she could not help but reflect on her strange encounter with the prince. "You seem preoccupied, my dear," Reverend Mills observed, peering at his daughter over his spectacles. "It's nothing, father," she assured him, placing a simple stew on the table. "Merely thinking of tomorrow's work in the garden. The east beds need attention, and Mr. Bartleby mentioned the possibility of redesigning the knot garden." Her father smiled gently. "I'm pleased to see you finding happiness in your work, Primrose. Your mother would have been proud." Primrose returned his smile, though her thoughts remained with the prince and his unexpected interest in her humble arrangement. It meant nothing, of course. A passing curiosity, nothing more. Tomorrow he would forget her existence entirely. Yet the following morning, as she tended the rose bushes near the east terrace, a footman approached with a note. "For Miss Mills," he said with a bow, handing her a folded piece of paper sealed with wax. With trembling fingers, Primrose broke the seal and unfolded the message, *Miss Mills*. Your arrangement has brightened my study considerably. I should like another for tomorrow, if you please. Something suitable for a gentleman who finds himself increasingly weary of society's pretensions. **N.W. Primrose read the note 3 times, scarcely believing the evidence before her eyes. The prince had written to her about flowers. She tucked the note carefully into her pocket and returned to her work with renewed vigor, her mind already cataloguing which blooms might best suit His Highness's request. The following day, she delivered an arrangement of blue hyacinths for constancy, snapdragons for grace under pressure, and a single white rose for silence and discretion, surrounded by sprigs of cedar for strength. It was a daring composition, perhaps, but one she hoped might convey understanding of his position. Another note arrived the next morning, *Miss Mills*. Your understanding of my situation is as remarkable as your talent with flowers. I should like to hear more about this language you speak so fluently. Perhaps you might attend me in the garden pavilion at 4 o'clock this afternoon. *N.W. Primrose's heart fluttered in her chest like a caged bird. A private meeting with the prince? It was beyond improper, beyond imagination. Yet how could she refuse a royal command? She arrived at the garden pavilion at precisely 4 o'clock, having changed from her work dress into her Sunday best, a simple muslin gown of pale blue with a modest lace collar. The prince was already there, standing with his back to the door, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the garden. "Your Highness," Primrose curtsied deeply as he turned. "Miss Mills," he acknowledged with a nod. "Thank you for coming. Please, be seated." He gestured to a chair at a small table, already set with tea and cakes. Primrose sat gingerly on the edge of the chair, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. The prince took the seat opposite, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. "I've been reflecting on your arrangements," he said after a moment. "There is a sincerity in them I find refreshing." "Thank you, Your Highness. Tell me, Miss Mills, what would you select to express weariness with pretense?" Primrose considered the question carefully. Perhaps chamomile for patience in adversity, combined with wild geranium for steadfastness, and a touch of dandelion. Dandelion? One dark eyebrow rose in question. "For faithfulness and happiness," she explained, then added with a small smile, "though many consider it a weed, I've always thought it one of nature's most determined creations. It thrives where it shouldn't, brings brightness to unlikely places, and remains true to itself regardless of how others perceive it." The prince's expression softened. "Like a vicar's daughter who becomes a gardener despite society's expectations." Primrose blushed. "Perhaps, Your Highness." Their conversation continued, flowing from flowers to books to music, and Primrose found herself increasingly at ease in the prince's company. He was well-read and thoughtful, with a dry wit that occasionally broke through his reserved demeanor. By the time the clock struck 5, she had almost forgotten the vast gulf of rank between them. As she rose to take her leave, the prince said, "I should like another arrangement tomorrow, Miss Mills. Something hopeful." "Of course, Your Highness." For 2 weeks, their pattern continued. Each day, Primrose would create a new arrangement for the prince, and each afternoon, they would meet in the garden pavilion to discuss its meaning. She learned that he had lost his mother at a young age, that he preferred Byron to Wordsworth, and that he found the responsibilities of royalty occasionally suffocating. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood, her love of gardening, and her dreams of someday creating a botanical garden open to people of all stations. It was dangerous, this growing friendship. Primrose knew it could lead nowhere. Yet she couldn't help the quickening of her pulse whenever he entered a room, or the way her thoughts increasingly turned to him as she worked in the garden. Their idyll was interrupted by the arrival of Lady Josephine Harrington, the Duke of Harrington's daughter and, if rumours were to be believed, the Queen's favoured choice for Prince Nicholas's bride. Lady Josephine was everything Primrose was not: wealthy, titled, sophisticated, and stunningly beautiful with her golden curls and perfect complexion. Primrose observed their first meeting from the shadow of a yew hedge, where she had been pruning when the lady's carriage arrived. Prince Nicholas greeted Lady Josephine with perfect courtesy, offering his arm to escort her into the house. The lady's tinkling laugh floated back to Primrose, who found herself suddenly very interested in a particular branch that needed trimming. That afternoon, the prince did not come to the garden pavilion. Nor did he come the following day, or the next. No notes requesting arrangements arrived. Primrose told herself she was not disappointed. After all, what had she expected? A royal prince had no business spending time with a gardener, especially when a suitable match had been presented to him. Yet she continued creating arrangements for him, leaving them in his study each morning before returning to her regular duties. Dahlia for dignity and elegance. Gladiolus for strength of character. Zinnia for thoughts of absent friends. Never roses, too presumptuous, but always with a sprig of rosemary for remembrance. A week after Lady Josephine's arrival, as Primrose worked in the kitchen garden, she became aware of voices approaching, Lady Josephine's bright tones and Prince Nicholas's deeper replies. She ducked behind a tall row of peas, unwilling to be seen. "Really, Nicholas, I cannot understand your fascination with this dreary countryside," Lady Josephine was saying. "London is where you belong. The season is in full swing, and everyone is asking after you." "I find the peace here conducive to reflection," the prince replied. "And the gardens are particularly fine this year." "Gardens?" Lady Josephine laughed. "As if you've ever cared for such things before. Next you'll be telling me you've developed an interest in farming." "There is much to be said for understanding the land one will someday be responsible for," he responded, a hint of steel in his voice. They passed the kitchen garden without noticing Primrose, continuing toward the lake. She remained hidden until their figures disappeared around a bend in the path, then returned to her work with a heavy heart. Lady Josephine was right, of course. What prince truly cared about gardens, except as a passing fancy? She had been foolish to imagine otherwise. That evening, as Primrose walked home through the gathering twilight, a figure stepped out from the shadows of the vicarage gate. She startled, then recognized the tall form of Prince Nicholas. "Your Highness," she curtsied, wondering what on earth he could be doing at her father's modest home. "Miss Mills," he greeted her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "I've missed our conversations." "I assumed your Highness was occupied with your guest," Primrose replied, striving for a neutral tone. "Lady Josephine is my godmother's choice, not mine." He stepped closer. "I've received each of your arrangements. The language they speak has been most eloquent." Primrose felt her cheeks warm. "I'm pleased they've been to your liking, sir." "More than that," he said softly. "They've been a reminder of what matters most: sincerity, understanding, and the beauty that can be found in the simplest things." He hesitated, then added, "I've come to ask a favor, Miss Mills." "Of course, Your Highness." "The Midsummer Ball is to be held at Thornfield in 3 days' time. The Queen and various members of the court will attend." He paused, seeming almost nervous. "I should like you to create the floral arrangements for the ballroom." Primrose's eyes widened. "Me?" "But surely Mr. Bartleby has agreed that your talent exceeds his own in this particular area," the prince interrupted. This is a royal commission, Miss Mills. I hope you'll accept. How could she refuse? It would be my honor, Your Highness. Excellent. He smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his solemn face. And one more thing, I should like you to attend the ball as well. Primrose's breath caught in her throat. That would not be appropriate, sir. I am merely a gardener, not a lady of quality. You are a vicar's daughter, he corrected, and I am extending a personal invitation. Unless, his smile faltered slightly, you would rather not attend. No. That is, I would be honored, but... She gestured helplessly at her worn work dress. I have nothing suitable to wear to such an event. Leave that to me, Prince Nicholas said with a mysterious smile. Good evening, Miss Mills. I look forward to seeing your creations, and you, at the ball. He bowed and departed, leaving Primrose staring after him in wonder. The following morning, a package arrived at the vicarage, delivered by a royal footman. Inside, Primrose found a gown of palest green silk, with delicate embroidery of primroses around the hem and neckline. Accompanying it was a note, *A Primrose by any other name would be as sweet. The gown belonged to my mother. I believe she would have approved of its new owner. **N.W. Tears pricked Primrose's eyes as she ran her fingers over the exquisite fabric. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen, and wholly inappropriate for her to accept. Yet how could she refuse such a gift from a prince? For the next 3 days, Primrose worked from dawn until dusk, creating arrangements for the midsummer ball. She selected flowers with care, delphinium for ardent attachment, lilies for majesty, Queen Anne's lace for sanctuary, and yes, primroses for young love. Each arrangement told a story, her story, though she doubted anyone but the prince would understand its meaning. The night of the ball arrived clear and warm. Primrose stood in her father's small sitting room, the green silk gown transforming her into someone she scarcely recognized. Her auburn hair, usually tucked beneath a cap, had been arranged by Mrs. Tippet, the vicar's housekeeper, who had once served as lady's maid to a countess. You look like an angel, my dear, Reverend Mills said, his eyes misting as he gazed at his daughter. Your mother would be so proud. Do you think it's too much? Primrose asked anxiously, smoothing the silk skirt. I feel like an imposter. Nonsense, her father said firmly. The prince invited you because he values your company. Be yourself, and you cannot go wrong. Easier said than done, Primrose thought as she entered the ballroom an hour later. The splendor of Thornfield Hall's grand salon was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting their light on jewels and gilded decorations, while an orchestra played from a dais at one end of the room. Ladies in sumptuous gowns and gentlemen in evening dress swirled across the polished floor, a kaleidoscope of color and movement. Primrose remained near the entrance, half hidden behind one of her own floral arrangements, watching the scene with wide eyes. Lady Josephine stood at the center of a circle of admirers, resplendent in a gown of deep blue that emphasized her fair coloring. The prince was nowhere to be seen. Your creations are the talk of the evening, a voice said behind her. Primrose turned to find Prince Nicholas watching her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He was dressed in formal regimentals, the dark blue coat adorned with gold braid highlighting the breadth of his shoulders. Your Highness, she curtsied deeply. Miss Mills, he bowed in return. The gown suits you. Thank you for your kindness in lending it to me, Primrose replied, careful to emphasize the word a lending. She could not presume the gown was a gift, regardless of the wording of his note. The prince's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. I believe the next dance is a country reel. Would you honor me with your hand? Primrose hesitated. I'm not certain that would be wise, Your Highness. There are many ladies of rank present who would be more suitable partners. Yet it is you I am asking, he said simply, extending his hand. Taking a deep breath, Primrose placed her fingers in his. A murmur swept through the ballroom as Prince Nicholas led her onto the floor. Lady Josephine's perfect features arranged themselves into an expression of displeasure, while the Queen, seated on a dais at the head of the room, leaned forward with interest. The music began, and Primrose found herself swept into the dance. Years of country assemblies had made her a competent dancer, if not a graceful one, but the prince guided her with ease. As they came together in the pattern of the dance, he leaned close. "Your arrangements tell a most intriguing story," he murmured. "Particularly the one by the Queen's seat." Primrose felt her cheeks flush. That arrangement had been her most daring: stock for lasting beauty, stephanotis for happiness in marriage, and ivy for fidelity and wedded love. "I hope I haven't overstepped, Your Highness." "Not at all," he assured her, his blue eyes warm. "In fact, I wonder if you might be persuaded to create similar arrangements for a more personal occasion." Before Primrose could ask what he meant, the dance separated them again. When they next came together, Lady Josephine was at the prince's elbow, her smile dazzling but her eyes cold. "Nicholas, darling, you must introduce me to your charming partner," she said, her voice honey over steel. "Lady Josephine Harrington, may I present Miss Primrose Mills, daughter of Reverend Mills of Thornfield Parish," the prince said formally. "Miss Mills is responsible for the floral arrangements you so admired earlier." "How delightful," Lady Josephine said, her gaze sweeping dismissively over Primrose. "I had no idea gardeners were included in the guest list." "How democratic of you, Nicholas." Primrose felt herself shrink under the lady's withering regard. "It was most kind of His Highness to include me," she said quietly. "Indeed," Lady Josephine agreed, taking the prince's arm possessively. "And now I believe you promise me the supper dance, Nicholas. We mustn't keep the Queen waiting, she's most eager to speak with us both." Prince Nicholas frowned slightly, but duty won out. "If you'll excuse us, Miss Mills." Primrose curtsied, watching as Lady Josephine led him away toward the Queen's dais. She should leave now, she thought. She had experienced the ball, had danced with a prince, a memory to cherish for a lifetime. There was no reason to prolong the evening and risk further humiliation. She was nearly to the door when a hand caught her elbow. Turning, she found herself face to face with the Queen's lady-in-waiting, Lady Elizabeth Weatherby. "Her Majesty wishes to speak with you, Miss Mills," Lady Elizabeth said, her expression inscrutable. "If you would follow me." Heart-pounding, Primrose followed Lady Elizabeth through the crowd to the Queen's dais. The Queen, a formidable woman despite her advancing years, fixed Primrose with a penetrating stare as she curtsied deeply. "So you are the gardener girl my godson speaks of so highly," the Queen said, her voice carrying just far enough for those nearby to hear. Lady Josephine, standing to one side with Prince Nicholas, pressed her lips together in a thin line. "Your Majesty honors me," Primrose murmured, keeping her eyes lowered. "Look at me, child," the Queen commanded. When Primrose raised her gaze, the Queen continued, "I understand you have a particular talent for speaking through flowers." "I merely arrange them as seems fitting, Your Majesty." The Queen gestured to the arrangement beside her. "And what does this one say?" Primrose swallowed hard. It speaks of lasting beauty, happiness, and fidelity, Your Majesty." "Appropriate for a royal wedding, would you say?" Primrose felt the blood drain from her face. "I would not presume to make such judgments, Your Majesty." The Queen's stern expression softened slightly. "Yet you have presumed to capture my godson's attention quite thoroughly. No easy feat, I assure you." Prince Nicholas stepped forward. "Aunt," he said quietly, using the familiar address permitted to him in private, "Miss Mills has created beauty that speaks to the heart. Surely that's a gift worth recognizing, regardless of station." The Queen raised an eyebrow. "Indeed? And is that all you wish to recognize, Nicholas?" A hush fell over the nearby guests, all straining to hear the exchange. Prince Nicholas straightened, his gaze moving from the Queen to Primrose and back again. "With Your Majesty's permission," he said clearly, "I should like to speak with Miss Mills privately." The Queen studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "Very well. Lady Elizabeth, please escort them to the blue salon. And Nicholas," she added as he turned to go, "remember who you are." Primrose followed Lady Elizabeth and the prince from the ballroom, acutely aware of the whispers that erupted in their wake. The blue salon was a smaller room adjacent to the ballroom, elegant but intimate, with French doors opening onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. Lady Elizabeth left them there, closing the door firmly behind her. "I must apologize for that public display," Prince Nicholas said once they were alone. "My godmother can be direct." "There is no need for apology, Your Highness," Primrose replied, moving to the French doors where she could see the moonlit garden beyond. "But perhaps I should return to the vicarage now. My presence is causing disruption." "Is that what you think?" He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could detect the subtle scent of his cologne. "That you are a disruption?" Primrose turned to face him. "I am a gardener, Your Highness. You are a prince. This," she gestured between them, "whatever this is, cannot lead anywhere but disappointment. And if I disagree?" His voice was soft, but there was steel beneath it. "Primrose, these past weeks have shown me what I truly want in a companion: intelligence, sincerity, a love of beauty, and the courage to remain true to oneself regardless of circumstance. I found all these qualities in you." Primrose's heart thundered in her chest. "Your Highness, Nicholas," he interrupted. "My name is Nicholas." "Nicholas," she whispered, the name foreign on her tongue. "You cannot mean what I think you mean." "The Queen, the court, Lady Josephine is my godmother's choice, not mine," he repeated firmly. "As for the Queen, she values happiness above all else. She will come to understand, as will the court." He took her hands in his touch warm and steady. "I had planned to speak with your father first, but circumstances have forced my hand." To Primrose's astonishment, Prince Nicholas, heir to the throne, future King of England, lowered himself to one knee before her. "Primrose Mills," he said, his blue eyes earnest, "your arrangements have spoken to my heart in a language more profound than words. You have shown me beauty in simplicity, truth in nature, and love in the most unexpected of places. Would you do me the very great honor of becoming my wife?" Tears sprang to Primrose's eyes. "This cannot be real," she whispered. "A prince does not marry a gardener." "This prince does," Nicholas replied, a smile warming his features. "That is, if the gardener will have him. But the Queen has already given her blessing, contingent on meeting you tonight. Why do you think she summoned you?" "And my father has already granted his permission when I called upon him 3 days ago." Primrose stared at him in wonder. "You planned this all along?" "From the moment I realized I loved you," Nicholas confirmed. "Which, if I'm being entirely honest, was probably when you explained the meaning of dandelions." His expression grew serious. "I cannot promise it will be easy. There will be those who disapprove, who will question your suitability. But I can promise to stand beside you through it all, if you'll allow me." Primrose looked into his eyes and saw only sincerity, affection, and something deeper that made her breath catch. Slowly, she nodded. "Yes," she said softly, then with more conviction, "yes, I will marry you, Nicholas." His face broke into a radiant smile as he rose to his feet, still holding her hands. "May I?" he asked, gently drawing her closer. Primrose nodded again, and Nicholas lowered his head to place a soft, tender kiss on her lips. It lasted only a moment, but in that moment, Primrose knew with absolute certainty that she had found her place in the world, not in the garden, but beside this man who saw her for exactly who she was. When they returned to the ballroom, hand in hand, the Queen announced their engagement to the assembled guests. There were gasps of surprise, murmurs of disbelief, and more than a few disapproving frowns. Lady Josephine departed in a flurry of outrage, declaring she would never set foot in Thornfield again. But there were also smiles and congratulations, particularly from those who had come to know Primrose through her work in the gardens. And as the orchestra struck up a waltz, Prince Nicholas led his betrothed onto the floor for their first dance as an engaged couple. "What flower would you choose for this moment?" he asked as they moved together across the polished floor. Primrose considered, her heart full to bursting with happiness. "Orange blossom," she said at last, "for eternal love and marriage. Combined with myrtle for good luck and love in marriage. And perhaps," Nicholas added with a smile, "a few dandelions. To remind us both to remain true to ourselves, regardless of how others perceive us. A perfect arrangement, Primrose agreed, returning his smile. Fit for a prince and his gardener bride. As they danced beneath the crystal chandeliers, surrounded by Primrose's floral creations, she reflected that some gardens bloom in the most unexpected of places, even in the heart of a prince who had learned to see the beauty in a humble gardener's flower arrangements.